The thing about silence was that Elena Vasquez had learned to use it the way other people used words. She had been a nurse at Dallas County Hospital's emergency department for 4 years. In 4 years, she had spoken when speaking was clinically necessary, answered questions with the precise minimum of information the question required, and otherwise maintained a quality of quiet that the staff had eventually stopped trying to fill. Some of them found it unsettling. Most of them had simply incorporated it into their understanding of who she was. The nurse who didn't make small talk, who documented everything, who caught things early, and who had a habit of positioning herself at angles to rooms that gave her a clear line of sight to all the exits. Nobody had asked about that last part. Elena was 39 years old. She had dark hair that she kept pulled back with the practical efficiency of someone who had decided long ago that hair was a variable she did not want to spend time on. Her face had the specific quality of someone who had been in enough situations that required not showing what was on her face, that the skill had become structural. Not a mask, exactly, but a resting state that gave very little away. Her colleagues described her, when they describe her at all, as competent, reliable, quiet. Dr. Patrick Howe, the emergency department's director, described her differently. Torres. He said it without looking up from the chart he was reviewing, which was how he said most things to most of the nursing staff, as though the act of visual contact was a resource he was conserving. The supply inventory for Base 6 hasn't been updated since Tuesday. I shouldn't have to notice that. Elena was at the medication station, preparing a 0900 administration round with the unhurried precision of someone for whom sequence and accuracy were not a matter of professional obligation, but of personal architecture. I updated it at 0630, she said. The system has a display lag on the administrative portal. The actual inventory is current. Hal looked up. He had the expression of a man who had just attempted to use a key that didn't fit and was recalibrating his assessment of the lock. The display should match the record, he said. I've submitted 3 maintenance tickets about the lag, Elena said. The most recent one was 10 days ago. I have the confirmation numbers if you need them. Hal looked at her for a moment. He was 47 years old and had been running emergency departments for 11 years and had developed, over that time, a comprehensive and reliable taxonomy of nursing staff. Elena Vasquez occupied a category in that taxonomy that he found mildly irritating in a way he hadn't fully articulated to himself, which was the category of people who were always technically correct. Get someone to look at the portal, he said, and went back to his chart. Elena finished the medication preparation. She put the confirmation numbers for the maintenance tickets in a note in the administrative system, time-stamped, because she had learned, in context considerably more consequential than a display lag on a hospital portal, that documentation was not bureaucracy, but evidence. She went to Base 6. Diane Mercer had been a charge nurse at Dallas County for 9 years and had developed, over those 9 years, a specific and finely calibrated sense for when something was about to happen in the department before it technically happened. The sense was not mystical. It was the accumulated pattern recognition of someone who had watched enough situations develop to understand their early signatures. The particular quality of a paramedic's radio transmission, the specific body language of a patient in the waiting area who was declining faster than their triage classification suggested, the way the energy in a room shifted when someone was about to decompensate. At 10:47 on a Thursday morning, the automatic doors from the ambulance bay opened and Diane felt the specific shift that meant something was coming that they hadn't prepared for. The man on the gurney was approximately 60 years old. He was wearing civilian clothes, dark pants, a gray shirt that had been cut open by the paramedics to access his chest. His skin had the particular color of someone whose vascular system was working very hard to maintain a pressure that it was losing ground on. He was conscious, his eyes open and moving, and he was saying something. Had been saying something, the paramedic told Diane, since they found him collapsed in the parking structure of the downtown Marriott, and he had not stopped saying it, and nobody on the ambulance had been able to identify the language. Vitals, Diane said, moving alongside the gurney. BP is 88/60 and dropping. Pulse is 124. O2 sat 91 and trending down. He was unresponsive for about 40 seconds when we arrived, came back on his own. No ID on him. No phone. He had this. The paramedic held up a room key card. That's it. The man on the gurney was still talking. The words were rapid, pressured, the specific quality of someone who understood that they were running out of time to communicate something important and was attempting to accelerate. Dr. Park, a second-year resident who had been assigned to house service since July and who possessed the specific combination of genuine clinical aptitude and significant self-doubt that characterized the best residents in their early years, stepped up to the gurney. "Sir," Park said, "can you understand me? Do you speak English?" The man's eyes moved to Park. The words didn't stop. "Can anyone identify this language?" Park said, looking at the staff gathering around the bed. Silence. The words kept coming. "It sounds Eastern European maybe," one of the nurses said. "Could be Russian," someone else offered. "It's not Russian," Elena said. She was standing at the edge of the group. She had been in Bay for when the gurney came through and had followed it with the specific attention of someone whose peripheral awareness had been calibrated to register incoming situations before they fully announced themselves. She was looking at the man on the gurney with the quality of attention that she usually kept less visible than this. Park looked at her. "What is it?" "Give me a moment," Elena said. She stepped forward. She moved to the head of the gurney, positioned herself directly in the man's line of sight. She leaned slightly forward, and then she said something. The words were not English. They were not Spanish. They had the specific cadence and consonant density of a language that most people in the room could not have placed even with extended listening time. The man on the gurney went completely still. His eyes, which had been moving with the scattered urgency of someone trying to be understood in a room full of people who couldn't understand him, focused on Elena with the specific and total relief of someone who has been alone in a very dark place and has just seen a light. He answered her. Elena listened. She asked something. He answered again, longer this time, his voice dropping from the pressured urgency of before into something that still carried fear but also carried, now, the specific quality of fear that has been partially metabolized by the act of being heard. Elena straightened up. She turned to Park. He says the pain started in his chest about 2 hours ago, radiating to his left jaw and his left arm. He took what he describes as a blood pressure pill this morning, which he takes daily. He has a history of a previous cardiac event. He says 4 years ago in his home country. He's describing the current pain as pressure, not sharp, which is consistent with his cardiac history. She paused. He also says he has a severe allergy to aspirin, anaphylactic. He had a reaction to it after his first cardiac event, and he's been trying to tell you since the ambulance arrived. The room was silent for approximately 2 seconds. Get the allergy flagged immediately, Park said, already moving. No aspirin, no NSAIDs. Give me a 12 lead, troponins, a BMP. Call cardiology for a consult. And get him on the monitor. If this is an MI, we need to know which territory. The team mobilized. Elena stepped back, allowing the clinical machinery to engage. Diane was watching her. Elena felt it. The specific quality of Diane's attention, which was not the casual noticing of a colleague, but the more focused attention of someone who had registered an anomaly and was processing it. She returned Diane's gaze briefly and then looked away. What language was that? Diane said quietly. Georgian, Elena said. Republic of Georgia. The Kartvelian language family. Unrelated to Russian or the other Slavic languages, which is why it didn't sound familiar. How do you know Georgian? Diane said. I studied languages, Elena said. Diane looked at her. You studied Georgian. I studied several languages, Elena said, which was true, and which was also the answer she had given twice before in 4 years when someone had asked something adjacent to this question, and which had twice before been sufficient to end the conversation. Diane looked at her for a moment longer. Then she went back to the board. Elena went back to Bay 4. Howe appeared at the nursing station at 11:15. He had been briefed on the Georgian patient. His name was Mikhail Kvaratskhelia, 62 years old, confirmed STEMI, currently in the cardiac catheterization lab, where the interventional cardiology team was addressing an occlusion in his left anterior descending artery. He was going to survive. The allergy flag had almost certainly prevented a treatment error that would have killed him faster than the cardiac event itself. Howe had all of this information. He was looking at Elena with the expression of a man who was adding up a column of numbers and was not comfortable with the total. "The Georgian patient," Hal said. "Kvaratskhelia," Elena said. "Mikhail. He's in the cath lab." "You speak Georgian?" "Yes." "How many languages do you speak?" Elena looked at the medication record she was updating. "Several." "That's not an answer." She looked up. 11, she said, fluently. "Several others, at a conversational level." Hal stared at her. 11 languages. "Some are related," she said. "The Romance languages share enough structure that learning one creates a foundation for the others. Slavic languages, similarly. The more divergent ones, Georgian, Mandarin, Arabic, those required more dedicated study." "Where did you study them?" Hal said. "Various places," Elena said. Hal had the expression of a man standing in front of a door that kept producing new locks every time he attempted to open it. "Your employment file says you worked in international clinical coordination before coming here," he said. "For a nonprofit." "Yes," Elena said. "For 9 years." "Yes." "And before that you were in graduate school." "Yes." Hal looked at her. He was a man who had spent 11 years running emergency departments and had encountered many things in those departments, and he had developed a reasonably comprehensive understanding of what nurses looked like when they were hiding something. Elena Vasquez did not look like she was hiding something. She looked like she was answering the question she had been asked and not the question she hadn't been asked, which was a distinction that he was only now, at 11:17 on a Thursday morning, beginning to understand as deliberate rather than coincidental. "In 9 years of international clinical coordination," Hal said carefully, "you learned Georgian." "Among others," Elena said. Hal opened his mouth. He closed it. He picked up the chart he had come to the nursing station to review and walked back toward his office with the specific posture of a man who had started a conversation expecting one type of exchange and had ended it holding something considerably heavier than he'd anticipated. Elena went back to the medication record. Diane, who had been at the board during the entire exchange, did not say anything. She had the expression of someone who was doing a great deal of thinking and had decided that the thinking was sufficient for now. At 14:23, the vehicles arrived. Elena was in Bay 8, performing a wound assessment on a construction worker who had come in with a laceration to his forearm that had been superficially dressed at a job site and that she had uncovered to find considerably more significant than the initial report suggested. She was in the middle of a conversation with him about the depth of the laceration and the likely need for irrigation and closure when Diane appeared at the door. "Elena," Diane said. Her voice had the specific quality of someone delivering information they are not sure how to deliver. "There are people here." Elena did not look up from the wound assessment. "People are here fairly regularly," she said. "It's an emergency department. These people are asking for you," Diane said. "By name." A pause. "There are also several vehicles in the ambulance bay that are not ambulances." Elena was quiet for a moment. She completed the wound assessment. She wrote the preliminary note. She told the construction worker that a physician would be in shortly and that the laceration was going to require more thorough treatment than it had received so far, and that he had been right to come in. Then she stood up, removed her gloves, and walked to the door. Through the glass partition at the end of the corridor, she could see the ambulance bay. There were 3 vehicles, dark sedans, not SUVs, not the dramatic machinery of a tactical unit, but the specific and understated vehicles of people whose operational requirements had moved them past the need for visible presence. Government plates, clean and unmarked. Beside Diane was a woman Elena had not seen in 4 years. And Caldwell was 53 years old. She had the kind of face that had been trained over a long career to communicate only what it intended to communicate, which meant that most of the time it communicated very little. And when it communicated something, it was usually something that mattered. She was wearing a dark coat over civilian clothes. She was carrying nothing. She was looking at Elena with the specific quality of attention that Elena recognized. Not from their previous professional relationship, though that was part of it, but from a more fundamental recognition of someone who has been looking for a thing for a long time and has just found it. "Vasquez," Caldwell said. "Director," Elena said. The department had gone quiet in the way that departments went quiet when something entered that didn't fit the categories the space was equipped to process. Staff at the nursing station had stopped the specific movements they had been making. Park, who was coming out of Base 6, had stopped in the corridor. Howe had appeared from the direction of his office with the expression of a man who had been alerted that something was happening and had not yet determined how to assert himself into it. "You've been difficult to locate," Caldwell said. "I wasn't difficult to locate," Elena said. "I've been employed at this hospital for 4 years. My tax records are filed. My nursing license is registered with the state board." "You know what I mean," Caldwell said. "I know what you mean," Elena said. "I chose not to be accessible through the channels you would have used." Caldwell looked at her with the expression of someone acknowledging a distinction that is technically valid and contextually irrelevant. "We need to talk," Caldwell said. "There's a situation." Howe appeared at Elena's left shoulder with the specific energy of a man who had decided that the appropriate response to the current situation was to insert himself into it with authority. "Excuse me," Howe said. "This is a clinical environment. Whatever federal business you have here, I need to understand what's happening in my department before." Caldwell turned her head. She looked at Howe with the quality of attention she occasionally turned on things that were functioning as obstacles to something she needed to accomplish. Howe stopped talking. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't aggressive. It was simply the look of someone whose internal assessment of the situation had already moved past the stage where Howe was a relevant variable, communicated in a way that Howe's nervous system apparently processed before his conscious mind could formulate a response. Caldwell looked back at Elena. "Who doesn't know?" Caldwell said. It was not a question. "Nobody here knows," Elena said. "The language thing this morning. Unavoidable," Elena said. "The patient would have died." "I know," Caldwell said. "That's not what I'm referring to." She paused. "One of our assets in Dallas flagged the event. The specific diagnostic sequence you used, the language identification, the allergy extraction, the differential you gave the resident. It's a recognizable pattern to people who have seen it before." Elena was quiet. "We've been monitoring this hospital for 6 weeks," Caldwell said. "Not because of you, because of something else. When the flag came in this morning, I was 40 minutes away." "What's the situation?" Elena said. Caldwell looked at her. The question had been asked in a particular register, not conversationally, not as an expression of concern, but with the specific impression of someone shifting into a mode that required different information processing than the one they had been in. "There's a conference at the Omni downtown," Caldwell said. 11 nations. Energy infrastructure. Started yesterday." She paused. "We have a credible indication that one of the delegates has been exposed to a nerve agent, modified, low dose, designed to present as a natural medical event. The exposure was likely Tuesday. Onset of significant symptoms is projected for somewhere in the next 2 to 4 hours based on the compound's profile." "Which compound?" Elena said. Caldwell said a word, a technical designation, letters and numbers, the specific nomenclature of something that existed in classified documents rather than clinical literature. Elena's expression did not change visibly, but something in her posture shifted in a way that Diane, who was watching from 6 feet away, could see but could not have described precisely. "You wrote the medical response protocol for that compound," Caldwell said. 12 years ago, when it was theoretical, before anyone had used it. "I wrote a protocol for a class of compounds," Elena said. "That designation wasn't in existence when I wrote it." "The class," Caldwell said. "Yes." She looked at Elena directly. "Which means you know what we're looking at if it presents in a standard clinical environment with staff who don't have the context to recognize it." Elena looked at the department around her, at the staff who had stopped moving, at Park, still frozen in the corridor, at Howe, who had the specific expression of a man who was recalibrating something significant. "How many delegates at the conference?" she said. 43, plus support staff. "And you don't know which one was exposed." "We have a list of 6 possible targets, based on the intelligence about the objective." "I need the compound profile and the list," Elena said. "Full clinical details on the 6. And I need to know which hospital they'll be triaged to if there's an event." "Parkland is the designated facility," Caldwell said. "We have a team there." But Parkland's team doesn't have the protocol," Elena said. They have the general literature on organophosphate compounds, Caldwell said. They don't have what you have. Elena was quiet for a moment. She looked at the wound assessment note she had written 6 minutes ago for the construction worker in Bay 8. She looked at the medication record she had been updating when Diane came to get her. She looked at the ordinary, textured morning of a level 2 trauma center doing its ordinary work. I need 30 minutes, she said. I have a patient with a laceration that needs closure before I hand him off. I'm not leaving him to someone else mid-procedure. Caldwell blinked. It was a very small movement, the specific involuntary response of someone who had anticipated a different shape of negotiation. 30 minutes, she said. And I need to brief whoever is running the response at Parkland, Elena said. Before we go, if something presents in the next hour and I'm in transit, they need to know what they're looking at. Agreed, Caldwell said. Elena looked at Diane. Diane was looking back at her with the expression of someone who had spent 4 years working alongside a person and was in the process of very rapidly revising their understanding of who that person was. Bay 8, Elena said. His laceration needs a 4-0 nylon closure, minimum 6 sutures. The wound is deeper than the initial assessment suggested. Tell Park. Diane nodded. Elena looked at Hal. Hal had the expression, she had seen this expression before in different rooms on different faces, of someone who had just understood that the category they had placed a person in was entirely wrong, and who was trying to determine what the correct category was, and who did not have sufficient information to make that determination, and who was experiencing the specific discomfort of that gap. She did not tell him what to do with the discomfort. That was his work to do. I'll need to change, Elena said to Caldwell. Caldwell nodded once. Elena walked to the locker room. Click, the sound of her shoes on the linoleum. Even and unhurried, the same rhythm it had always been. She was back in 26 minutes. She had changed into the dark civilian clothes she kept in her locker. Not tactical gear, not a uniform, simply the kind of clothes that didn't advertise themselves, that moved well and didn't catch on things. She had her phone. She had a small kit that she had kept in the bottom of her locker for 4 years without opening, which she opened now and checked and repacked. She had also, in those 26 minutes, called a number she hadn't called in 4 years, had a 9-minute conversation with a person at a facility that she was not going to describe to anyone in this building, and had received confirmation of 3 pieces of information that she needed to have before she walked into the situation Caldwell had described. Caldwell was waiting in the corridor. 2 of the people who had come with her were still visible near the ambulance bay doors. Diane was at the nursing station. She watched Elena come out of the locker room. Elena stopped. Diane looked at her. The expression was the specific and complex one of someone who was trying to hold several things simultaneously. Surprise, the revision of assumptions, something that might have been concern, and underneath all of it the specific and particular regard of someone who has worked alongside a person and found them good at the work, and is now encountering an expanded understanding of the depth of that goodness. The Georgian patient, Diane said. Kvaratskhelia. He's going to be fine, Elena said. The LAD occlusion was caught early enough. The cardiology team is good. Diane nodded. He asked about you, she said, when they were prepping him for the cath lab. He kept asking for the woman who understood him. She paused. I didn't know what to tell him. Tell him the next time he travels internationally, without his medical records translated, he should hire someone better than he did this time, Elena said. Diane almost smiled. I'll tell him something gentler than that. Yes, Elena said. You're better at that than I am. She turned toward the ambulance bay doors. Elena, Diane said. Elena stopped. She looked back. Are you coming back? Diane said. The question had several layers. Elena heard them all. I don't know, she said. It was the honest answer. She had given honest answers consistently in this building for 4 years, and she saw no reason to change the practice now. She walked toward the doors. Caldwell fell in a step beside her. I need everything you have on a compound, Elena said. Synthesis profile, delivery mechanism, observed symptom progression if there are case reports. In the vehicle, Caldwell said, and I need the interpreter roster for the conference. Not the official one, the full one. Caldwell looked at her. Why? Because if someone at that conference was exposed on Tuesday, Elena said, They have been spending 2 days trying to communicate something to someone, in whatever language they have available. And either no one has understood them, or someone has understood them and hasn't told you yet. She paused. I want to know which interpreters have had unusual interactions with which delegates in the last 48 hours. Caldwell was quiet for a moment. They reached the ambulance bay doors. Outside, the 3 dark sedans waited with their engines off, patient and unremarkable in the October sunlight. You've been in that building for 4 years, Caldwell said, running medication rounds and updating supply inventories. I've been a nurse, Elena said. It's what I was before the agency, and it's what I know how to do. I know, Caldwell said. We've been watching. I know you've been watching, Elena said. You're not as quiet as you think you are. Caldwell's mouth did something that was not quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. We need you back, Vasquez. You need me for today, Elena said. We'll talk about the rest of it after. She got in the lead vehicle. She came back on a Thursday, 17 days later. Not to stay. She had not decided that yet, and she was being deliberate about not deciding it until she had sufficient information, which was how she made all decisions, including the one 4 years ago to come to Dallas County Hospital and take a position running medication rounds and updating supply inventories and being quiet in the way she knew how to be quiet. She came back because Mikhail Kvaratskhelia was being discharged, and she had been told he had asked for her again. He was in room 412. He was sitting up in the hospital bed with the specific and alert quality of a man who had come very close to something and had emerged from the proximity with a heightened awareness of ordinary things. The light coming through the window, the sound of the corridor outside the door, the fact of being alive in a room that smelled of antiseptic and lunch trays. Elena stood in the doorway. He saw her and said something in Georgian. She answered. He said something else. She answered again, and his face produced an expression that was the specific and unmistakable result of a long time spent trying to be understood in a language that the room around you does not speak, followed by the relief of finally, simply being heard. They talked for 14 minutes. She told him, in his own language, exactly what had happened to his heart and exactly what the cardiology team had done about it, and exactly what he needed to do differently in the next 12 months if he wanted to still be alive in 12 months. She told him without softening the clinical reality or embellishing it, because she had found consistently that people received accurate information better than comfortable approximations of it, and that being heard in your own language was a form of respect that earned the right to deliver the truth. He thanked her. She said something back. He laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere below the fear. She left. In the corridor, Diane was waiting. I want to talk to you, Diane said. I assumed, Elena said. He's been doing some research, Diane said carefully, about international clinical coordination nonprofits. I assumed that too, Elena said. They walked together toward the nursing station. Are you back? Diane said. Elena looked at the department around her. The monitors beeping, the medication cart, the board with its organized chaos of patient locations and clinical priorities. Bay 8, where the construction worker had received his laceration closure and had gone home the same afternoon. Bay 2, where someone new was occupying the space where Kvaratskhelia had been brought in. For now, Elena said. It was, again, the honest answer. She went to the nursing station. She picked up the chart for the patient in Bay 2. She began to read. The department moved around her with its ordinary rhythms, and she moved within it, and the sound of her shoes on the linoleum was even and unhurried, the same as it had always been. If Elena's story reminded you that the most extraordinary people are often the ones saying the least, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about the people walking among us carrying more than anyone knows. Drop a comment. What language did you think she was speaking? The debrief with Caldwell happened on a Tuesday in a conference room on the 14th floor of a building downtown that had no visible signage and that Elena had been to before, years ago, in a different context. The situation at the Omni had resolved. The exposed delegate, a deputy minister from a country she was not going to name in any conversation that was not encrypted, had been identified on the second day when a pattern in his interpreter interactions had surfaced that matched what Elena had described. The compound had been detected. The treatment protocol she had written 12 years ago had been adapted and applied. He was recovering. For other people in the conference had been exposed at lower doses, below the threshold for significant symptoms, and were being monitored. Nobody had died. Caldwell put a folder on the table between them. Elena looked at it without touching it. 6 months, Caldwell said. Consulting basis. You stay at the hospital. We call when we need you. You call me once in 4 years, Elena said. We didn't know where you were for most of that time, Caldwell said. And when we found you, we were watching the situation to understand what you'd built there before we disrupted it. Elena looked at her. You were watching to see if I'd built something worth disrupting. Caldwell's expression was steady. We were watching to see if you were well, she said. There's a difference. Elena was quiet for a moment. It was the kind of quiet she used when she was receiving information that required recalibration, and she was allowing the recalibration to complete before she responded. The Georgian patient, she said finally. What about him? When I came back for his discharge, I wasn't thinking about the agency. I was thinking about a man who had been trying to tell someone something for 2 hours in a room full of people who couldn't hear him. She paused. That's the work. That's all I was doing. I know, Caldwell said. That's the work I want to keep doing, Elena said. The hospital, the medication rounds, the patients who come in and can't be understood because the language they carry their fear in isn't the language anyone in the room speaks. She looked at Caldwell. That matters. It matters, Caldwell agreed. It also nearly got you identified 4 years before we found you. I was careful for 4 years, Elena said. You were, Caldwell said, until you weren't. Elena looked at the folder on the table. She didn't touch it. 6 months, she said. Consulting only. I am not in the field. I'm not active. You call me when you have a specific medical or linguistic problem that requires what I have. I consult. I return to the hospital. Agreed, Caldwell said. And Dr. Howe doesn't get a full briefing, Elena said. He gets enough to understand why I'm still employed there despite the fact that I apparently vanished for 17 days without adequate leave documentation. The rest stays classified. Caldwell's mouth did the almost smile again. He's already been briefed at the appropriate level. How'd he take it? He updated your employment file, Caldwell said. And he submitted a maintenance ticket about the administrative portal display lag. She paused. It said that the actual inventory had been current all along and that the display issue was a known and unresolved problem. Elena looked at her. He also, Caldwell said, removed the language from your performance review that described you as reserved in team communication. Elena was quiet. What did he replace it with, she said. Effective under pressure, Caldwell said. And exceptionally thorough documentation practices. Elena picked up the folder. She opened it. She read the first page. She turned to the second. She read it with the specific and focused attention she brought to everything. Not quickly, not with the performed efficiency of someone demonstrating that they were reading, but with the genuine and complete absorption of someone for whom information was the primary material of their work and who treated it accordingly. She closed the folder. Send me the compound file for the cases you mention on page 3, she said. I want to review the symptom progression before any of this goes operational. Already sent to your secure line, Caldwell said. Elena stood. She picked up the folder. She walked toward the door. Vasquez, Caldwell said. She stopped. The delegate, Caldwell said. The one who was exposed. He asked about you. Through channels. A pause. He wanted to know who developed the protocol that saved his life. Elena was quiet for a moment. What did you tell him? We told him it was classified. Good, Elena said. She walked out. On Thursday morning, 3 weeks after Kvaratskilia's discharge, a woman came through the ambulance bay doors at Dallas County Hospital at 7:42 a.m. speaking rapidly in a language that the triage nurse could not immediately identify. The woman was approximately 40 years old. She was holding her right arm against her body. Her face had the specific color of someone in significant pain. Her words were rapid, pressured, the quality of someone who understood that they needed to be understood and was not sure they were going to be. The triage nurse looked around the department. Elena was at the medication station, preparing the 0730 administration round. She looked up. She listened. Farsi, she said, already moving. She's saying she thinks her arm is broken. She fell on the ice in the parking lot outside. Elena was beside the woman now, her hand on the woman's uninjured arm, speaking to her. The woman's face changed, the specific change of someone who has been trying to be heard and has just been heard. She also says she has a latex allergy. She's been trying to say that since she came through the door. Park, who had been across the department, was already moving. Elena looked at him. "No latex gloves," she said. "Flag it immediately." On it, Park said. Elena spoke to the woman again. The woman answered, her voice lower now, the urgent pitch beginning to settle as the room finally understood her. The department moved around them, doing its ordinary work. Elena's shoes made their even sound on the linoleum. Steady, unhurried, present. She was, when it came down to it, exactly where she had chosen to be. And that, too, was a choice she had made deliberately, which was the only kind of choice she made.